Hello there, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about protecting your real most valuable asset, and I am not talking about money. Oh no, we're going to be talking about protecting your health throughout your career. But before we jump into all that, my name is Patricia. I am here to share with you from all of the wonderful and not so wonderful experiences that I've had over my the many years of my professional experiences that have resulted in some top leadership positions, helped me to serve in some governance roles that I so appreciate in the community and in the public aspects, and also to talk about building those relationships that really matter for our lives. And of course, making sure that we take care of ourselves all along the way. And that's what we're going to get into today. But before that, let me make sure to remind you to like this video, to subscribe, and dare I say, even to share, um, so that others can, hopefully benefit from these insights as well, because that's really my goal, is to share, put the word out there, and help build a community of empowered people, particularly empowered women and entrepreneurs and women of color. So that said, okay, so here, all about my little health journey. This is going to be abbreviated because this could go on for quite some time. So I would suspect we will revisit this issue at some point, but I really want to lay out just kind of the higher level thing, because the real thing is, we talk or are told to protect our most valuable assets all throughout our lives and our careers, right? And that could be our education, really going gung ho on that. Did that, graduate from high school with honors. Thank God made it through undergrad, because that was a journey in and of itself. Made it into law school, graduated, and then did the thing, passed the bar on the first try. A lot of time, a lot of investment, and absolutely a very valuable asset, and one that I have protected down through the years by, just managing how people try to access, my brain and what I bring to the table. Cool. Which gets to managing, a reputation. I definitely think that your reputation in the professional world is a very valuable asset. And people know that for me, I value it so much because I rely so heavily on the relationships that I've built down through the years, because of my career as a lobbyist and legislative uh, expert in all things education and beyond here in my state, that I, of course, value my reputation and consider it a very important asset. And then there's just the experience, period, right? All of the experiences, the time, the long hours, the putting up with a bunch of crap, from less qualified people, all of those things are assets to be protected. But you want to know the thing that really no one ever talked to me about until it was too late, or until I started observing it for myself, and that is protecting your health. I really did not get that message. And by the time I was learning it, I was knee deep in needing to manage it at a whole other level. And that's can tie into absolutely all the work that is going on. Young professional, young black woman, lawyer, entering some spaces that other people weren't getting to enter, and that some who were there didn't want me to enter. I have those stories. Look forward to sharing some of them. So there's a lot of stress, right? And then, there's just the perfectionist in me, which was just, I'm still managing it. I call it being a recovering perfectionist. And so that adds to the stress levels as well. But no one told me until I was dealing with some pretty crazy stuff, the level of how stress from work and life and all of that can impact your health to the point that you then might not be able to do the work that you care so much about, or that you're trying to achieve for to reach whatever levels there are. And so that's what I'll share a little bit about today. Again, knowing that we may have to revisit this definitely down through the years. There's been a lot. And I think when I've thought about this before, there was something that had happened way back, even before the situations that really come to light, right? And I remember when I was a baby lawyer that I had uh, been diagnosed with, it wasn't an ulcer, it's the pre-ulcer stage, right? So there was something that was going on. I was having issues, and our doctor back then was like, "You need to chill out because you don't want your stress levels to like make this a full blown thing." And I forget what it was, the official diagnosis was, but it was kind of the pre-ulcer stage, which is like chill out. So that's fine. Move right along. I never thought about that again till many, many years later, because that was probably really my first sign that I won't say I ignored. Of course, I was concerned about it. I'm type A and whatever, but not from the perspective of thinking about where it could lead down the road. I've never been diagnosed with an ulcer. So it's not even that, but it went so much beyond that because it's the stress and what stress can do to your body in ways that you never even anticipate. Do not take it for granted, right? And there can be all kinds of stress. You've got family matters, you got financial matters, you got work. And we spend a lot of time at work, a lot, dealing with a lot of situations. And those are where I can look back now and see where things will just continue to build. One of those, when I was working at um, a university system where, I was the first uh, female and Black and person of color to be in one of the top executive roles. And so I was dealing with a lot, for sure. I had two small kids at the time. I was relatively newly married, if I'm thinking about that. Yes, the timing. And so there was a lot going on. And also realizing I was, 10, 15 years younger than my peers in the office, those with the same title. And, you know, there's a lot to be said there. And they were all men. Yes, they were all men. So I had been brought into that situation. I had been pursued. It was not one that I went after. And I'm very thankful still to the day for that opportunity and those lessons. And there are some things that I look back on now that I absolutely would have dealt with differently, but that's years, right? Hindsight's 2020 all the time. There are not a lot of things that I regret about it, except for dealing with a few situations. There are a few things I probably would have dealt with a little bit faster and a little more aggressively. But when you're in that role, when you're in that position, and feeling like you got your guard up all the time, it gets a little crazy. And so that was my first time full blown having stress induced health issues that was causing me like physical pain in my body that I couldn't like explain or get away. And I was like, oh my God, there's other thing that's wrong. And it was actually my chiropractor at the time was like, yeah, it's called your job. It's your job, and you kind of probably need to get rid of it. And I was like, dude, you're crazy. No. And he was like, yes, it was. I remember distinctly that at one point when things were really getting bad, that I couldn't stand, like physically stand, to cook an entire Thanksgiving dinner. We had to have dinner with a friend. So anyone who knows me knows I love to cook, I love to entertain, all of those things. And that was at the height of me doing that. And I wasn't even trying to like entertain a bunch of people. It was just us. And I couldn't do it because of the stress in my body. Like physically, my body was screaming at me. And when I went back to the chiropractor, he was just like, you gotta slow down. You can't get rid of the job situation right now, then you gotta manage everything else in your life. And we were approaching Christmas, and he was like, so what do you normally do for Christmas? And I talk about this big party that I always throw and how I decorate the whole house and all of these things that I do. And he's like, yeah, you can't do any of that. And I was like, dude, that's like blasphemy. What are you talking about? And he was like, I'm just telling you. So I ignored him and I went through with my plans. This lasted about a week, of trying to plan, do my Christmas things. And I will never forget trying to put up Christmas decorations like I normally would by myself. They never all totally got up that year. I physically could not do it. It was too painful. And so I had to cancel everything. It was literally one of the most peaceful Christmases and holidays that I had, and allowed me to calm down some as far as my body's concerned. And then moving forward. Now, so by the following spring, leadership had changed at my office. I worked in a political position, all fine and dandy. And so by that spring, I left. Transition happened. I was gone. Late spring. And when I went back to the doctor, he was like, so how are you doing? I'm like, yeah, it's really weird. Like, I don't feel any pain. And literally, the day after leaving the office, the pain was gone. And it was gone the next day after that, and the day after that. Now, mind you, I had no idea what I was going to do. I wasn't, I had been actively looking for another position, but none of those had come together. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. But apparently it was to move on from that. And that was just crazy to me to know that that level of stress had resided in my body to the point that when I walked away from the position with some help, be truthful here, that it literally disappeared overnight. Again, a lesson for the future. So that's after that. I went out on my own, started a new business that I had not planned on starting. There's all the stress that comes affiliated with that, not knowing, not, first time not having a steady paycheck. I'd always worked for someone since I, graduated from law school. And so these were all things. And I had two small kids, and, it was a lot. And that ended up being a different kind of stress because it was related to finances and all the things that come with not knowing about, paying Cobra for health insurance. Y'all, that's from the devil. And that was way back when. I can't even imagine doing that today. And all of the things. So that created a different level of stress that showed up in my body in a different way. Very aware of it, trying to manage it. Move forward, pivoting in the work that I do. Step away from doing legislative work completely. I was still doing policy and strategy in my consulting firm and things I still enjoyed, but transitioning also to more executive level coaching and the work that comes along with that. So still working for myself in a different way and the pivoting and there's stress there. And all along like my body is telling me a story of like you need to go set yourself down somewhere. And it showed up in a brand new way at whole new levels by this point, such that I started having chronic, what is called angioedema episodes, and that's where you have literally have random swelling in your body. And normally, when you go in, they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's some blood pressure medication you need to get off and switch." I was not on blood pressure medication at that time. Did not apply. Oh, well, then let's check and make sure it's not um, something that is hereditary. Had those tests done 3 times, not hereditary. The third option is if it was stress induced. And I'm like, hello, have you seen my life? And that is just mind boggling and literally went on for years. Now, here is how this plays in because by this point, I am doing even more public speaking because it's literally a part of the work that I do, delivering presentations. I was doing a live video show, my coffee time career chat twice a week live on multiple platforms. Even when I would binge, or not binge, but I would plan ahead. Batch is the word I was looking for, but that still meant being able to be ready to be on camera and to do that. Well, here's where this developed into a problem, into impacting what I could do and where I could go, is because my lovely little edema friend, not, was showing up in my face so that there would be random swelling that could be instigated by the littlest thing that my body determined it was a threat. And it would show up in my face. And I would have a very, very swollen face. Um, and this has been going on for years. And there's no cure for it because, you have to retrain your body to not allow stressful situations to trigger it, which meant doing a whole other realm of things that I'm still learning how to do about not about stepping away from people and things that would have be crossing boundaries, from stepping away from people and things that cause unnecessary stress that I'm not required to carry, like it's not something that I need to be engaged in. So guess what, go handle your own problems. All of these things, and learning that ultimately it was a matter of resetting my nervous system to not allow, or not, so that regular everyday situations were not being treated like it was a critical alert moment for my body. And that was a lot. And it has been a journey for several years to get to a point to where I'm not having multiple of these episodes, multiple in a month, much less in a year, right? And I'm very thankful and very blessed to get to this point. But did I really need to get there this way, right? And it may not be that type of chronic thing, but I know that there are women who are facing these types of situations because I have worked with them. I have been colleagues with them as a new business person, the folks that I work with that I talk to often now, fellow business owners, particularly women. And the reality is, stress can take a toll on your body and affect your health to the point that it negatively impacts the work that you do, which then, of course, generates a whole new level of stress, right? And if you want that not to be the case, you have to decide where you're going to break the not the habits, not the word I want to use, but but snap that thread and where you're going to cause that break to happen actively and be proactive as opposed to reactive about it. And that's what I want to remind and encourage folks is, and sharing this, like I said, there's so much more that I could talk about with this, and going into details about, situations. Oh my gosh, it's just so much. But here's the thing, regardless of what your situation is, stress happens, right? We live life. Stress is not always bad. There's good stress, like when that's related to when good things are going on. The reality is, however, that when you get to a certain point, your body may or may not recognize good stress or distinguish good stress from bad stress, or from when you're just catching a cold and it triggers something else. So, actively taking care of our bodies and engaging in those things that help to support us long term matters. This goes beyond working out, this goes beyond going to the gym. This is about engaging those things that feed our soul and remembering to keep them first. So, before I jump too far ahead of myself, first thing, recognize the signs and don't ignore them. That's a two-parter. I'm sure that for anyone who is listening today and thinking about this matter, there's been a moment already where you realize, and you ignored it, or you may could be in a situation now. And I'm going to encourage you not to ignore it, to recognize what those signs are for you when things are about to go a little bit south when it comes to how you're allowing some stressful situations to impact you. Recognize it and don't ignore it, right? We have enough going on in the world around us that we don't have any control over, that we absolutely must be able to try to do our best to manage the things that we do have some control over. And I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. It's not easy to just walk away from a job or to cut off conversations or connections and things like that. But before you get to that point, there are some things you can do. The second thing I will say is prioritizing your self-care. And again, someone say, "Oh, well, you're just talking about getting massages and and pedicures or whatever." No, no, no. I'm talking about so much more than that, because it's the mental health, it's the physical health, it's the emotional health, and the spiritual. All of those things encompass us making sure that we are taking care of ourselves from a holistic standpoint, right? Getting to this point meant having to emotionally detach from certain people or certain situations, from digging deep and recognizing when there were boundaries that I was allowing to be crossed, and having to reinstate them or put them in place that they didn't exist previously, right? There's a lot of growth, is what I'm trying to tell you, that has to happen. And I encourage everyone to be mindful of it sooner rather than later. I love having these conversations with my kids and with young professionals and other folks so that when the time comes, they're able to take action and to do so proactively rather than reactively. Nothing's perfect. Stuff is going to catch us off guard for sure. But some of the things that I know now, had I known them 20, 30 years ago, I might have been a little more proactive in how I manage some self care things. For example, because as things kept getting, you know, more difficult and more challenging, I can look back now and see where all of those things that were keeping me uplifted, all of those hobbies and those things I did just to fulfill my own self-care and to give myself a break from the heaviness of the work or the challenges that later came with owning a business. I had removed all of those things from my life because I needed to focus on making this job better or on making this business work. And meanwhile, spiritually and emotionally, things were just taking a tank because you know what? I wasn't singing in the choir anymore, or I wasn't um, playing with paper and scrapbooking anymore. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's that part called having a life that has nothing to do with productivity, that has nothing to do with pleasing someone else other than yourself for the pure enjoyment of it. Those creative outlets, those opportunities are the things that really were feeding my soul at the time. And I did not know how much until they were gone. So, literally, part of the reset for me has been reinstating those things. Now, I've said I'm a recovering perfectionist. So, of course, I tried to jump back in and do all the things all at once. And my body couldn't do that. Like, literally, physically not capable. But going back slowly, getting back into my gardening, which allowed me to get back outside, which I wasn't doing a lot of, and digging around in the dirt and taking the walks and all of that, allowing that stress to melt away and not for me to be so centered on a problem that I could not solve right then, right? For bringing all the house plants and things like that back in because I'm working on a whole new collection now. For getting back to reading for pleasure. All of these things that someone could say, "Oh, that's not me." Guess what? I've seen it happen. I'm not the first, and I won't be the last. So I'm always going to be an advocate for encouraging your putting yourself first, literally. That little cliche about when you're on a plane and they tell you to put your mask on first, guess what? That that is just real. It really does matter. You can't support other people. You can't be there for other people if you don't have the air to even take care of yourself, right? And you need to consider that those things that you do for pleasure, for your personal enjoyment, to step away, even if it's stepping away, that's air for you so that you can take a deep breath and move on to the next thing, face the next challenge, right? And then the third, little tip that I would just say is ultimately you got to be willing to make a change. And what that change looks like, I do not know. For you, I do not know. For me, there were several pivots, but it included ultimately as things worsened that I had to make an internal change with myself where how I dealt with certain people, certain situations, and not owning other people's work for themselves. Like, you got to go do that work for yourself. I cannot do it. Never could, but now I know that I could not, right? Um, as well as those things externally, and recognizing, you know what, here's all I can provide for that, and you all will have to deal with it. And if they weren't willing to, then to remove myself from that process. So there were things, people, places, opportunities that I was releasing so fast. It was like I was playing hot potato, but I needed to do that for my own well being. And that's what I really want to be able to share, is that you are worth the effort, and you do not have to wait until you're facing some chronic illness, some chronic health crisis of any sort to take that action. Do it for yourself now. And that's what I wanted to share. And this is a very vulnerable moment. And there's so, like I said, there's so many more details that don't need to get into currently or right now. Maybe at some point in time I will. But this here, putting this on the record, these are conversations I've had privately, one on one. Definitely sharing sometimes a story with my coaching clients, who I require as part of their work is going back to hobbies that they've enjoyed in the past, or to find a new one. Because as you're working through challenging issues or concerns, even if they're good ones, requires an outlet. So I always want to make sure that my people have an outlet. And that is part of the work that we do together. And I ask them about it. Like, they have to report in on what they're doing for fun. What are you doing just for you? Right? Because a lot of times we need to be reminded of that, especially when things get intense, when life hits you fresh. Okay, so that's it. I thank you for allowing me to share that with you. I would love to hear your input, concerns. DM me, whatever, because we need to know that we're not alone. And this is my way of letting you know you're not alone in this, and that there is a way out and through, so that you can still be your strongest self in a healthier way, right? Um, and so that's what I have to share. Before I forget again, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing. And as always, remember to celebrate who you are and all of your greatness each and every day, and all the things that you do. All right? Take care. Talk soon.